In this session, I'll do a demo about deploying a Node.js application that is using npm packages in a controlled way in your organization. In a controlled way means that only tested and approved npm packages will be used when deploying the application to the different staging environments and finally to production. This demo exists of 6 activities going from development to deploying the Node.js application to the first staging environment, the integration environment. I will start showing you the initial application on the staging server called OpenWeather. Then we will open Clarive and look how our artifact repository looks like. This artifact repository acts as the registry for the tested and approved npm packages. Now we are ready to develop and test the new requirement. This requirement adds the functionality for showing the environment information on the OpenWeather web page. I will do this development and testing on my development PC. After the implementation of this requirement, we will look again what is happening with our artifact repository and inform our release engineer that we have a new revision. The release engineer will now update the change set with the revision information and deploy the OpenWeather application to our first staging environment, the integration environment. And finally, I will show you the application which includes the new requirements. Start the demo now. I will show you the current state of the application in our Windows staging server. Therefore, I launch a browser and type in following address localhost 4100 for showing my application. What does this application do? If I enter a city, let's take my hometown, Antwerp in Belgium, and I push the get weather button, it will return the temperature in Antwerp. Now what you see here is I'm running it on port 4100, but I can run now the same application in another browser on another port, and this port will be 4200, which is my application which is currently running in my test or QA environment. Now I don't see it in my web page, and that's the change I will make going forward. So let's close these two applications here, minimize my Windows staging server, and go to Clarive to see what we already have into Clarive and where we are in Clarive. First of all, I have a revision with all my changes for version 0.1, which I've just shown you in the staging environment. We also see that I have deployed it into the integration and the testing environment using a change set. It's on my Kanban. I will use the next step of my release engineer, will use the next tile here, or the next change set, or the next topic here, to deploy my application in my integration environment after I've made the changes towards in the code. Then you see a monitoring tab where I will follow my deployments, and you see here my artifacts tab. What is now my artifacts tab? It holds all my artifact repositories, which is not only my npm repository, where I store all my tested and approved npm packages, but next to that one, I've also stored in my artifact repository my Node.js installation files, which I have tested and which are being approved. And next to that one, I've also per application, I'm holding all my applications with me, what are being deployed on my Windows staging server. You see for my integration environment, build number 1 is being deployed. For my testing environment, build number 2 is being deployed. But let's focus ourselves now on the npm repository. Now we can start the development. To look at the development, first thing what I need to do is configure my npm environment on my development machine. And how can I do that one? By typing npm config ls. There I see my environments, and what do I see here? That my registry is now correctly set to save clarive.com artifacts report npm, which means that when I'm developing and I'm installing an npm package on my development machine, it will reach out to my Clarive artifact repository. And when it doesn't exist in my Clarive artifact repository, it will reach out to the registry.npmjs.org repository to get the package. So let's start doing it now. So we're opening now my development environment, and I've already prepared something because I need to make multiple changes to the applications to be able to show my environment to the user who is using the application in test mode, in QA mode, in 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 production. So what do I do now? So I have here my version is my package JSON. I didn't commit anything yet, so you see they are still unstaged. But what I will do now is I'm going back to my terminal. I will first of all install my packages, which you see in my package.json by typing the name npm install. By doing that one, it will start installing all the packages I need for my npm install. And this will take some time. So all my required npm packages are now being installed, and now I can test my application. This I will do by entering following command npm run dev. So what you see here now is this weather application is running on the development environment and listening on port 4000. Let's now see if my application is working correctly. So let's type in localhost for 4000. And what you see now is that this application runs in a development environment, and I'm going to enter, of course, my city name again and get the weather, and it returns the temperature of the town I've entered. So my application is working, so we can assume that the packages the application is using, the npm package the application is using, are now testing and being approved. So next step, what we need to do now is we go to our developed environment. What I'm gonna change now is changing my version into the application version so that my deployment can write down the right application version with the right build code to that package.json file to be able to install the right packages. So I'm gonna save this one, and now I'm gonna stage all and commit my packages. But before I'm doing that one, I'm gonna show you some changes. So if I click on this one, you see I have changed my style sheet. I've changed, sorry, I changed some codes in my server.js where I added my environment. This application runs in the environment, and I added the environment rest in the rendering of the page. And in my index, I also changed how it is presented with my style code into it. So this version is okay. So I type in a version number here, and I commit that version to my local Git repository. The next step will be that I push that code into my Clarive repository, or the Git repository that is managed by Clarive. How can I see it now? Is by returning to Clarive. I'm now going to refresh my repositories. So refresh my node. And when I go now to revisions, I have here version 2 installed. When I go to my master history and I refresh this one, I see I have also now version 2 installed. Now, before I'm handing it over to my release engineer, we're going to look into our artifact repository. So when I now refresh my artifact repository and I go to my npm, you see here that I have here all my packages are now downloaded in my artifact repository, and these packages are now being considered as my tested and approved packages, and they will be used when I do my deployments. This engineer, Ricardo, will now start deploying my application, my second version of my application to the staging environment. He sees a ticket has been created and is a change set to do my second deployment of the open weather application. Now he needs to attach the last revision to that ticket to be able to deploy my new requirement into my next staging environment, which is the integration test environment. He will save it and then he will return back to the Kanban. And in the Kanban, he will move that ticket to promote it to the integration environment. Here you see that the transition will be promoted to the integration environment. It's a standard pipeline which we will run for deploying the npm packages. It's the latest version of that pipeline because we are versioning our pipelines, meaning that if we have deployed using an early version of a pipeline, we can always use that earlier version of the pipeline to deploy this application. And there's also a notion about when can I deploy that pipeline. Clarive has already calculated the date and the hour to deploy that pipeline, and it's all green, which means I'm allowed to deploy that application with that pipeline to the integration environment. I can now submit the job, and after initiating and checking the job, he starts the deployment, and we can follow up that deployment in the monitor. So when I open it, this one, and I refresh it, then you see that the monitoring is following up the deployment. He did a check and an init phase, which means he's checking the quality gates. If all quality gates are met, he's checking if the environment is up and running, for instance, in the init phase. In the pre-phase, he's preparing the whole application, which means he's packaging the application, he's building the application, he's packaging the application, he's transferring the application already to the staging environment. And then in the run phase, he is running or deploying the application in that staging environment. Finally, he goes in the post phase. What does the post phase do? The post phase will update my history of my master branch, and what you see here is that now currently my master branch is my head is on the integration environment. He will also update my change set ticket. When I do a refresh on this page, you will see that my change set ticket is also in my integration environment. That's what's being done in the post environment. When clicking on the job log, we can see the detailed activities done by the deployment. So first of all, we see the summary of the page, if it was successful and not successful, the timings and so on. Then we see an overview of the active time per phase, and we see the details activities for each phase. What we will do now is I will go directly to some important parts of the phase, which means in the pre-phase we have the build system, we have the package of the system, which are very short in this time because we only need to package the code. And finally, we're gonna publish the artifact to the staging environment, and we ship the deployment of the package to the remote server. We can look into that one by double clicking on it, and if we change the debugging level, we can see more information, and we'll see if the shipping of the file was successful, yes or no. In this case, it was successful. Going back one step and going further in our log file, we're gonna see the run steps, and in the run steps he does do a little bit more of things. He's gonna say, okay, what's my node installed? Yeah. Then he's gonna see if my system is locally linked to the locally system. We're gonna deploy the system. Then we're gonna install and the required npm package. So it takes a little bit more time. So if we go into this one and we go into the finished one, you see here your environment is being set up for using Node npm. So he's returning the messages. If we're going still further into the system, we're going to create a start node batch file, and then we're going to start a system. And if we're looking into detail into this one, we see that the system is started via a PowerShell script, and it's finished with the return code 0, which means the application has been started. If we now close these files and we go now to our Windows server, we can see of the application was successfully deployed and was started on the staging server. So by opening the browser and typing in the address of our integration environment, we should be able now to see our new requirements opening, and he's saying this page runs in the system testing environment, and let's see if my functionality is still working. So by typing in a city, and it returns also the degrees which are currently in Antwerp. So the temperature in degrees which are currently in Antwerp. So which means that my application is now being successfully deployed to the server. If we're closing the application and now closing the server, we can wrap up this session by saying if we are deploying our npm package, what are we doing here is we have created a Node.js, or we have adapted a Node.js application by adding the environment of making the environment visible in the web page. And by doing so, we have uploaded artifacts in our artifact repository, like you see here. And for deploying, these are the artifacts what will be used for the staging environments, and finally also for the production environments. With this, I want to end this session and thank you very much for listening.